The Forgotten Letters. The house on Maplewood Street was one of those places that seemed to exist in its own world, untouched by the chaos of modernity. Its faded yellow paint and slightly warped porch boards carried stories of time and weather. Inside this unassuming structure, William Turner lived quietly, his days defined by routine and the occasional moments of introspection. In his 70s, William often felt as though he had settled into the final chapter of his life, a chapter without surprises or grand events. Yet a part of him couldn't shake the feeling that something vital had been left unresolved. It wasn't that his life had been unfulfilled. A retired teacher, William had spent decades shaping young minds, sharing his love for literature and history. He had once been married, though the relationship had ended in divorce many years ago. There were no children to visit him, no grandchildren to brighten the quiet corners of his home. For companionship, he had his books, his garden, and the birds that flitted in and out of the branches outside his window. This particular autumn morning felt unusually vibrant. The golden leaves on the trees shimmered in the sunlight, while the faint chill in the air carried the scent of change. As he brewed his tea and prepared for his morning walk, William decided to venture into the attic, an impulsive decision, sparked by the faint memory of an old photo album he hadn't seen in years. The attic was a realm unto itself, a place where forgotten belongings gathered dust and waited patiently to be rediscovered. Dimly lit by a small circular window, the room was filled with boxes, trunks, and stray objects. William paused at the top of the stairs, taking in the faint mustiness of the air before stepping forward. He sifted through boxes labeled holiday decorations and old books, his fingers brushing against items that stirred vague recollections. But it was the small, leather-bound trunk tucked behind a pile of furniture that truly caught his attention. Opening the past, the trunk was unlike the other items in the attic. Its leather exterior was cracked but sturdy, its brass fittings dulled but elegant. William knelt before it, feeling the excitement and trepidation that comes with revisiting the unknown. He unfastened the latch, revealing its contents. Bundles of letters tied neatly with faded ribbons. For a moment he simply stared, struck by the beauty of the discovery. He picked up the first bundle and carefully untied the ribbon. The letter on top bore a date from decades ago, its handwriting faint but familiar. "Dearest Will." The words reached out to him like whispers from the past. The letter was from Margaret, a woman he had known in college, whose wit and warmth had once been a bright light in his life. They had spent countless afternoons discussing books and dreams, walking together through the autumn campus, imagining futures that seemed limitless. As he read her words, William felt himself transported back to those days. The sound of her laughter, the way she brushed a stray lock of hair behind her ear. Margaret's letters were followed by others. Notes from childhood friends, colleagues, and one from Elaine, the woman who had been the love of his life. Each letter carried a distinct voice, a thread in the tapestry of William's story. He read through them all, letting their words fill the quiet air of the attic. By the time he reached the final letter, the daylight streaming through the attic window had softened to a golden hue. William sat in the silence, holding the letters close to his chest. They weren't just pieces of paper, they were pieces of himself, fragments of a time he hadn't realized he longed for. The question began to form in his mind. Could he find them? Could he reconnect with the people who had written these letters and rediscover those moments they had once shared? Setting out the decision to embark on this journey wasn't easy. There were doubts, fears, and uncertainties. But William was resolute. He spent the next morning poring over the letters, compiling a list of names, dates, and addresses. Many of the addresses were outdated, and some of the names belonged to people he wasn't sure were still alive. Nevertheless, he felt compelled to try. Packing a small suitcase and sliding the leather trunk into the trunk of his car, William began his journey. His first destination was Willowbrook, a small town where Margaret had lived when they were in college. The drive was peaceful, the road lined with trees whose autumn colors painted the scenery. As he approached the address from Margaret's letters, his heart quickened. The house was charming, with a picket fence and a yard filled with daisies. William took a deep breath and knocked on the door. Margaret's legacy. The woman who answered wasn't Margaret. It was her daughter, Claire. She greeted him with a mix of curiosity and warmth, listening intently as he introduced himself and explained the reason for his visit. Over cups of tea in her cozy kitchen, William shared stories about Margaret, her intelligence, her laughter, her determination to become a writer. Claire's eyes brimmed with emotion as she admitted that she hadn't known much about her mother's youth. Before he left, Claire gave him a book Margaret had written, a novel that reflected the depth of her mind and the beauty of her spirit. The inscription inside read, "For Will, who believed in me before anyone else did." William's heart swelled as he held the book, a testament to the connection they had shared. Reconnecting with George next, William travelled to Harmon Heights, a bustling city where George, an old friend, had once lived. George had been a musician, someone whose passion for music had defined his life. The address from the letters led William to a modest apartment building, and as he knocked on the door, he felt a mix of hope and nervousness. The door opened, and there stood George. Though his hair was grey and his steps slower, his grin was as infectious as ever. "Will, you old dog," George exclaimed, pulling him into a bear hug. The evening was spent reminiscing, laughing, and sharing stories. George played his guitar, strumming tunes that carried the essence of their youth. As the night wore on, George shared his own journey, the struggles he had faced, the family he had built, and the grandson who now carried on his love for music. Before William left, George handed him a handwritten song saying, "You were always my biggest fan. This one's for you." Finding Elaine. The most emotional stop on William's journey was the coastal town where Elaine lived. Their relationship had been passionate and tender, though ultimately fleeting. When William arrived at the address, he found a quaint bookstore. His heart raced as he stepped inside, scanning the room for her. Elaine was there, arranging books on a shelf. She turned as he approached, and for a moment the world seemed to pause. "Will," she said softly, her smile carrying the weight of years. They spent the afternoon walking along the beach, their conversation weaving through the past and present. Elaine confessed that she hadn't thought about the letters in years, but was glad he had found them. As the sun set over the water, Elaine touched his hand and said, "Some connections are worth holding on to, no matter how much time has passed." Coming full circle, when William returned home, he placed the letters back in the leather trunk, along with the gifts from his journey, the book from Margaret, the song from George, and a photograph from Elaine. The trunk now held not just memories, but mementos of a journey that had transformed him. William began writing his experiences, crafting a memoir that captured the beauty and complexity of his journey. Titled The Forgotten Letters, the memoir resonated with readers, reminding them of the power of connection and the courage it takes to look back. For William, the journey wasn't just about finding closure, it was about rediscovery. The letters had shown him that life's connections are never truly lost. They merely wait for us to find them again.